Good afternoon. It's Joyful Christian Hermit. I'm trying yet again with another video. This is my third one on this one topic that is really a miracle. A miracle for me, a miracle how it all happened just in the last 3 to 4 days. And I think it's very important that I share it and share what this, just even the miracle part of it, and what this person had to say, and how it's impacted my life. Really, I needed God's answers. God used this person, a stranger out there, who happened to see my video pop up on their feed, on the person's feed, and wrote to me a first comment, and it broke through to me in a powerful way that I've needed in 29 years, or even longer, really, but since I became more aware as a Catholic. And the difference of myself and the things that transpired as a Catholic mega times more in the wonderful learnings, in the understandings, in the spiritual experiences, in the Mass, in the Eucharist, and then in these ecstasies that let me know, that Jesus is the Mass. I mean, it's his Mass, and that the Mass itself is a mystical experience. And the different aspects of it, which I've talked about in other videos, what I was shown in these ecstasies over 12 years' time, every single Mass. And I wasn't in, it was maybe 4 years I hung in, 3.5 years daily, except when I would have too much pain and couldn't be there. But otherwise, I would have these ecstasies from the very beginning of Mass all through, and was forewarned of them, foreshown. My guardian angel was showing me to the stairway to heaven. And then these ecstasies began. And I was in heaven during Mass. I was in God. And have since been in that mode of understanding at a deeper level that Jesus is in us. His real presence is the Trinity, and his real presence is in us. And the Trinity, God and Jesus, is love. Pure love. God is pure love, and that is within us, and we are within God. And the more that we come to grasp and understand and absorb this as a reality, the closer we will be in God and in his love, the more loving. And then, as St. Michael told me exactly, way back in 2004, it was, summer of 2004, love to suffer and suffer to love. And that's been talked about in a different video where I didn't know yet, but I had come to love this young priest. He was 40, but young to me, but dynamic, talented, seemed so right on target with his homilies were excellent. People would come to that little parish. It was stuffed full on the weekends of people coming from other places. I had come from another place, and actually was brought there by a priest, told to go there, or that would be someone I could go to for some spiritual direction that I could try, who was fairly close to my small town, half-hour away. But that priest who told me he knew that this priest had this underlying problem, big problem. But the devil had blinded this other priest to the degree of how awful. Well, this priest with the problem was very lovable and was so talented and gifted and energized and doing so much in his parish, but it was all a fraud as far as what was going on within that priest within, and then his actions too, his hidden life, all kinds of bad, icky, sick. And so that's how the devil can operate, and can deceive those around. And I had been deceived just long enough to get there. And then once I finally got there and moved in that area, after the third attempt to get a place that I wasn't deceived on and had smoker, because had developed a smoke allergy that I'd never had in my life. And it was a serious one. My doctor said, you've got to get out. I had to move from two different places that I moved into, rentals, that the owners had lied to me that there had not been smokers there. Finally got into a parish, rented me a house that they'd used for a couple of religious sisters who went back to the mother house. Dwindling convent, a number of sisters, and they were older. So they retired to the convent and no more were coming. So they had this house that they rented to me. Not the parish with the priest with troubles, though, but nearby, like 10 minutes away or less. And that one weekend, end of July of 2004, I had this waking vision, this event. I don't even think it was a vision. I mean, it was actually happened. These demons came in, naked young demons. And I was laying on the floor like this with my knees up, right before the altar, the tabernacle, praying. It was late at night. No one was in there. And in comes these demons. And actually, I don't think I had yet moved into the rental house. I was waiting for it to get through their parish council. The priest said it would happen. I just had to wait for the meeting on the following Tuesday. But I was established there and still, going back and forth to my mother every day in a nursing home. She was in our hometown, but very alone because of her illness. So I needed to be there every day with her. And I had promised my dad on his deathbed that I would take care of her and make sure that she wasn't alone. Because we all were there. My mom was there with him all through until it got to the point where we were all called to be there for his death. So, yeah, so it was, and so I was given this forewarning of something coming that was not right. And I was starting to sense something with this priest who I'd got to know closely. He was spiritual directing me, or at least listening to my situations that I would have. And up until that point, I hadn't been rejected by his own parishioners. Not yet. It was to come. The horrible mistreatments and accusations and assumptions and things. So St. Michael proclaimed that after these demons ran in and naked were sitting up against me, their butts up against my sides, all around me. I couldn't move, surrounded by these adolescent demons. And St. Michael appeared and stood there, his spear into the ground, like, ready to use it, but standing there. And he made this proclamation: love to suffer and suffer to love. And then he ran that spear down through my heart. And everything, all the demons left, and St. Michael disappeared. But I knew something was coming big. And by the next day, I was shown. And I went to the confessional. And it was a Friday night that I had that event. Saturday, late afternoon, before the 5 o'clock Mass, I went in. Or maybe it was the Saturday morning after that Mass, he had confession, or right before I went in. And said, I know. And I knew his grandmother, who was on the other side, said, Your grandmother is horrified and wants you to stop this, and this is terrible. And he was just like, but then on the following Monday morning, he wanted to talk, and he spilled it all out, everything he was up to. He loved talking about it. And he also kept saying, he said, that you kept saying all these things that you experience. And he says, I kept wondering, well, why is it you don't see me and know about me? And it freaked him. But I said, well, God waited until I was invested here, because otherwise I would have been gone. I would have been so far away from what you're into and doing. I've had enough. I said I left all that. I was run out of my own hometown. And here I am. And here you are. And I know you and care about you. And you've got these terrible things going on. Well, he wanted to stop them, or he said he did. Seemed very sincere, wanted my help. So I worked with him for, it was about a year maybe, and 3 or 4 months. And then he kicked, it's a whole saga. I've talked in bits and pieces. That's not the point of this video, but that's just how things happen. One after another after another. I call them assignments. But this stranger who happened to see my video, just the one video where everything a few days ago was coming to a head in my whole life. And I was at a point of deep shock and horror and remorse that I had in essence caused my own chaos, my own upset, by remaining involved in parishes and in that aspect, and kept doing these assignments that God would give me to do. And not really formally. It wasn't like he would say, here's an assignment for you. But I would get to know, and then he would show me these things, or the person would erupt like the first priest. But after I already God was calling me into the church. And I loved the church. I fell in love with the church. And then bit by bit by bit, Jesus and God and the Holy Spirit showed me the bowels of the church, showed me the temporal world of the church, and the temporal sinners, all of us people, but people that the devil had gotten to that were a big get for the devil. Priests, bishops, parishioners, protocols, laws, church laws, things that humans would meddle with, because we want to meddle in things always. We want to also create and don't stop ourselves, and we don't wait for God to inspire something. Some things are necessities that were created, protocols, traditions, and dogmas, but not all are truth, as we find out. Those of us, and it is just miraculous, this person wrote, because about maybe it's been 4 days now, because for 3 days I've been trying to do this video, and it always just keeps triggering me to all these events in the past in my life, because this person knows, has been there. I don't know if it's a man or a woman, but out there somewhere, and didn't know of my videos, just popped up on a feed, saw the one where I was in my aha moment to the deepest of deepest degrees. But in confusion, asking these, I was getting ready to ask hard questions of God. And the next day I did, after that video that this person saw. So and I've gotten permission from the person to highlight these comments. They're necessary for us to know, for all of you who have these similar experiences and maybe have left the church because of it, not understanding. that this is how God was utilizing us. We're part of his army. In other words, we're part of the body of Christ. That won't ever change unless we deny God, and people don't, but maybe get into something else, into leave the Catholic Church for a Protestant church or a startup church, or not at all. And then some of us, though, I understand now, and it's okay, because it's been 12 years now. That's the only thing I could figure, is that God didn't want me in the parishes, and probably didn't want me earlier on after the ecstasy started. But I kept, we're taught we have to go. We're supposed to go and be in Mass and receive the Eucharist. Well, I was receiving supernaturally, but you see the conflict that's created then. But this person knows and has been through it and has had answers from God, that God evidently realized I needed to know right away, in a way that I would get it. And God used this stranger through this first comment to answer some of the questions. It was miraculous. This comment came at the end of the day that the day after I had posted my video at night. At the end of that next day, all that day, 4 days ago, I think, that I was asking very hard questions of God, very tough ones, and hard for me, because it was crunch time, and I was in a kind of a shock of, what have I done? This confusion, this conflict. Why would I have taken all that abuse and gone through all that and caused my own in many instances? And in one instance, with one assignment and a collapse, there came the devil. I was even forewarned by Padre Pio of a trick of the devil. And then the devil came and was there as a friend. Or had become a friend, but someone I would never suspect of being filled with the devil. I'd had a forewarning the first Mass I went to, though. I'd had a forewarning, but I shoved it out. I couldn't believe it. No. That person wouldn't. That wouldn't. I even mentioned it to my mother, my Protestant. She says, well, be very careful. Be very careful. But I just dismissed it. I buried it. It couldn't be. But yes, it was, and I got tricked. God brought lots of good out of that. Terrible, terrible fall and lessons I learned. And I had strength. God wouldn't get me out of it. I begged him. But he gave me the strength to get myself out of it. And then I did a penance and all. And Jesus was so pleased. And it also solved a temporal problem for me for the rest of my life. It solved a big facet of my life that I knew without a doubt was solved. Never again would I be bothered, and never again will I be bothered about all these other concerns or feelings of guilt, or even the guilt that I at times, resented. Why did I even go back to more lessons to become a Catholic? But then I have to factor in how God led me into the church through miracles and visions and locutions and daytime things, uncanny things that would happen. And the voice telling me even, like, this is the priest you're to go to see. The first priest. And I wouldn't have met my spiritual father, the priest that was a priest for 72 years in the end. Died at over 99 years old. and holy, and was like we were soul friends from forever. And he guided me well, balanced and all. So this is just has been incredible. So this is the first message. Let me have a sip here. Oh no, this is actually the last one. The first one, though, it started out telling me how this person had my video pop up in the person's feed and watched it and decided to write a comment to me, but didn't say the full thing about how he or she decided to send the comment. Instead, this is what the person wrote in the end after giving me information, 2 comments as it turned out. This is the third. After I asked if I could talk about these things and share and explain, just how much this person, that God used this person as a servant, as a messenger to me of the answers I needed, of the questions I was asking God. But I was asking God these questions the day after I posted the video at night. And I didn't get this message until that night, then, of the end of the day I was asking these questions of God and facing what I'd done to myself, even. Still not fully getting it. It wasn't coming together for me at all. And I was grieving that I would never be in a parish again. I would never be in a mass again. That God definitely didn't want me. And I realizing how I was spared from that canon law 603. That's even been validated more. I'll talk about it in a different video. So this person says, if I have helped you in any way, most certainly share as you please, especially if my comments will help others too. I think these will. There's others of you out there. And there's others, everyone out there. We have been party to treating people who are different in certain ways, shunning or whatever, or just assuming they're odd or crazy or weirdos or something, off the deep end, whatever. And we also have been party to being sinners and not being as other people hope and dream, that we are the ideals ourselves, that we are holy. When we do bad things, we create the problem that some other servant of God is going to be given an assignment to suffer out and clear up, or be horrified and sickened, and their faith, their hearts shattered from what they see of the ideal of this glorious church that Christ founded, that he's the head, that could be so ideal and so glorious, but we sinners taint it, including priests, clergy. There were even, I think, people said, 6 popes that had bad cores, got in. And in history then were realized to have been not good. So, yes, these comments are important for all of us that this person shares. Especially has been a lifesaver for me. I praise God and I thank the person. I'm forever grateful that you give our Lord all the credit, because it's really his story to tell. Our lives are his story to tell. And I have felt guilty that I've been so open about the ugliness and the awful things that I was revealed to me, one after another after another. including I was right on about this young priest recently who is very autocratic and extreme in the temporal, very tied up in the temporal extremes and being autocratic. So that's been confirmed and would have been another, but he isn't interested. I wrote to him and offered even to talk afterwards after I said I wasn't going to continue on. I'm very satisfied. It was not at all to touch, have anything to do with Canon Law 603. Absolutely not. God is leading me in my hermit life. I'm God's hermit, and God is over all his hermits. God's the one who approves and chooses hermits. He doesn't need bishops to do it. But for some people, they need that. They need that temporal. The church is being increasingly temporalized. So, yes, this is God's story to tell. All of our lives, it's God in us and whatever he uses us for and how he utilizes us is God's story. Whatever is good in me, this person writes, is all him. This is a holy soul. Honestly, I'm humbled. You think I am a faithful servant. I don't have any such delusions. If anything, I've always been extremely resistant to him, the better part of my life. Well, I cite Jonah, the prophet Jonah. He did not want to go to Nineveh. He fought it. And God kept moving him along toward Nineveh through miraculous events. He wasn't going to let Jonah get out of it. And then Jonah found his courage and got to Nineveh, got out of the whale, 3 days in the whale, fussing, avoiding, didn't want to go. But that stunned Jonah. And his life was spared to do this mission he had, this assignment for God, to go to Nineveh and warn them. Repent. Because the people of Nineveh were into the externals to an extreme of the temporal world and totally had forgotten God, beyond temporalized the temple, and were living very worldly lives. And so Jonah did walk through Nineveh proclaiming that message. And he was thinking, good, I did all this. I nearly died getting here. Was, thrown overboard by these shipmen, thinking that it was his holiness that caused the storm to come, that they thought Jonah was the cause of the storm, and might have been representative, because our turmoil in us and our resistance to God creates an energy force that's negative around us. When we go buck up against God, we don't even realize it, but bad happens when we resist God. So, but the people repented immediately. Jonah was sort of upset. He was hoping that God would strike them all down. But no, his mission was successful. Those people repented. The king, rent his clothes and put ashes and wore sackcloth and put ashes on himself and repented and called for all the people to repent, and they did. So, the mission was complete. And Jonah was just sort of left there, like, oh, exhausted. Look what all he went through. So, but that's God. God utilizes us in different missions, work, assignments. And the person then doesn't think that we've done anything of any worth, really. It's exhausting. And we're persecuted and kicked out, run out, or become ill, sick, have spent our lives, our bodies, our minds are shot. I'm ill. I realize this person's so right. The person will say more. Anyway, doesn't have any such delusions of being a faithful servant. But yes, this person is, and gives this example, though, of why the person doesn't think, with a recent example, why he or she isn't a good servant or faithful. God pestered me for a day and a night to speak out to you, to me, to send me something, talk to me, send a comment. You know what those spiritual nudges are like when he wants us to act. Yes, I do. And I also know what it is to keep resisting them. But we eventually follow through. So I finally wrote then my post, and my post erased. So I wrote it again. God bless. If this person, though, had followed through, see, God knows us so well. If this person had followed through the first night after reading or hearing my message, 4 or 5 nights ago it's been now, and had sent that message right then, I hadn't had my day of reckoning yet and of asking God these hard questions. Instead, the person resisted. God knew the person was going to resist, and for how long the person was going to resist the nudges. But God knew that his faithful servant would follow through. God knows this person, and this person is a faithful servant. And God knows the person doesn't think that he or she is. But in everything this person's done, the person did follow through. And that's important for me to know too. I did follow through. Even with these videos, I have been sharing what is sort of a no-no. We're not, I'm sure I've had people, drop off or think this is terrible. This person shouldn't be talking this way about these people or these situations that are going on. These realities. It's distasteful, sinful. But I feel compelled. Like I said, it's like a document dump. But also in this phase of my spiritual life, and even when I started out, I wanted my grandchildren, at least, if they ever wanted to get to know me, or my children, if they want to know even these deeper parts. They know about the mystical things, but they don't understand the love to suffer and suffer to love, or that these are assignments. And that if they were in my shoes too, or in my body and mind and heart and soul, they would follow through also. We do what God asks us. Because when we love God, we might fuss like Jonah, or like this person put off for a day and a half, a night and a day. But God works, he factors that in. He factored the timing in, that I would get this next message then from this person. But I wanted to share that part. That just shows the miraculous element of all this, and of how God chose this faithful servant out there who has also had assignments. This person calls it work for God, the work that God gave the person. I always refer to them as assignments for God. And sometimes I don't know them until I'm even part into it, or even after. Depends. But, and we think that we're not all that successful. But God then at some point in time lets us know, yes, and that he's pleased. And that he's pleased that we tried even. Pleased that we persisted and that we tried. and pleased that we remain steadfast to God. And even if it's taken me a long, long time, even to let go and realize, yes, God was pulling me out. And that he, even at the very beginning, he would have just kept me in that corridor with those rooms, that peaceful setting, studying, reading, praying, writing, and loving him, and he was loving me. But God knew. He knows his church today. He knew the first priest, and even my spiritual father. Of course, you go to Mass. You receive, and if I hadn't received his real presence, I wouldn't have realized the vast difference. The vast difference between a consecrated host and the communion I had growing up as a Methodist. There's no comparison. No comparison. There is supernatural, mystical. Christ's body and blood are in the consecrated hosts. There's a force of energy in them, emanating from the tabernacle. And that's, so, and when I went back to my home Methodist church for my dad's memorial, and I was in there with everyone, all these loved ones and wonderful friends and all, and it was just so different. I realized this is just a room of lovely people who come to worship and sing together and greet one another and love one another, and are, hear the scriptures, and the minister does a sermon. But it was just an empty room. There's so much missing. The tabernacle, his real presence, that power, source of God himself, his real presence. And it's the immediate thing at my very first Mass I went to. When I left the one church, the United Brethren, I think, and realized I just got to go to a Mass. I think it was a Palm Sunday. And my son wanted to come with me. And when I got in there, I was toward the back. I just could tell there was this force coming from the front, somewhere in the front. Later on, I realized, when I was a little girl, I was drawn to this area of this church that was like a block away from us, but we could see it because we were up on a hill and it was up on a hill. And then there's a valley, and then this church was over there. And I would just sit back in our back room and look at that. There was something over there that just drew me. And then later I found out, after I was Catholic, years later, that was where the tabernacle was, in that curved area, that one spot. And so, see, it's a reality, a supernatural reality. And probably some kind of electromagnetic energy of some source, which one time God explained to me, the Holy Spirit, that it's similar to like neon or something flowing through a figure 8 tube. It's not that, but it's that was the best example he said that I would be able to understand. And Dr. H was asking questions, and that was the metaphor, the example given. So these things are, there's all this conflict then for what we've been through when we have assignments, and then, but what we would have missed, see? So I can think, why did I just not walk out? And then I realized my whole life needed and still needs the church that Jesus founded. That's why I finally started praying. What's the church that you founded, Jesus? I'd been to all these different seeking. I had passed through the Protestant churches and others, of an evangelical or startup church. I tried, experimented with old Buddhism, New Age, Eastern religions, read about them, and none of them were clicked. But this was the church that Jesus founded after I started praying that. This is right where God led me. And so, but it's humans have done a lot to it in 2,000 years. We've meddled and created, and some things were necessary logistically, structurally, organizationally, administratively. When you have millions and millions of members worldwide, it's a miracle itself and a wonder and a testament to holy people for all the centuries to keep this church as unified as it is, and the worship still glorious. The Mass is still glorious, and it's just a marvel. And all the good and great clergy, holy people, holy parishioners, holy members of the church in the body of Christ. But as with all people, we have the capacity to sin. And it can get really ugly in something that's meant to be so pure and has Christ as head, who is pure love, to have such taint and such division and confusion. And in our time period, people so needful of the temporal, they're temporalizing the church, and it's going the opposite way that it should. The church is not meant to be temporalized. It's meant to be spiritual, more holyized. Holyize the church. Spiritualize the church. I'm not talking New Age stuff. I'm talking recognize. Recognize God is pure love. Loveize the church. Elevate all the sacraments. But love is the answer. God is pure love. So this first message I got, just don't get off. This thing just so got me at all levels. This person writing, and now even more knowing that the person resisted, and all that it took this person to agree, because it brings up what the person's been through. Anytime we're reminded, like the stuff I talk about reminded this person of all the work and the horrors this person had been revealed, and the work that the person did on missions for God to correct situations or whatever, all involved, to be an immolation, to be crucified repeatedly in various ways, emotionally, mentally. Those are the worst. So this person writes, this is a great, great information to know, because God can start having anyone experience things that God chooses. So you may be chosen to have spiritual vision, experiences, and gifts. So this person says, those of us who have spiritual vision, experiences, gifts, at times, it's not all the time, at times, by His Majesty must come from God, are sometimes ostracized by the temporal church or by its members. This can be part of our suffering in self, as we are shown mysteries of His kingdom and of God Himself that can be in conflict with our own beliefs and dogmas, or the beliefs and established customs of this temporal world church that we are taught. creates a conflict, tremendous conflict for us, those of us who are shown these things, like the conflict I had of God, why would you want that? Canon Law 603, when you can have me directly. See, that was a conflict because this person online writes all these great things, sounds logical, it's very theological, very mental, intellectualized, but still it made sense off and on. It sounded like, so you think, well, yes, I should be legal. I should, this, if this is what God allowed or wanted in the church, this law, this church law, it's important. Why wouldn't God want me to be that? But I was shown the truth. Why would I want that? That's going backwards. I even felt that. The times I would request and I would be denied by some odd reason, I would be so relieved because it felt like I was going backwards to go into more something so temporalized and something created by humans, a canon law on hermits when it was never needed for 2,000 years. And God did just fine without that. It's a vocation between God and a hermit. And for the church, yes, it helps the church to have hermits, but the church doesn't need to temporalize that vocation whatsoever. Does damage to it, and it already has. There's not been fruit, not yet anyway, of people standing out and being known and wanting respect and recognition and to be legal and to be the only ones that can identify as Catholic hermits because they're approved by a man, a bishop, granted in a great vocation, did well, so got appointed to bishop after being a priest. But who knows? Who knows the inner? So, it's a position. It's an elevated position. But why have that when you can have God? God's always been in charge of his hermits and done a wonderful job, obviously. The church has canonized many of them. And we have their writings that are quoted and utilized and read all through these centuries. Hallmarks of great holy people who came to intimately know and become one with God and left writings of great value to all of us. So yes, that's an example of how, just in my life, how conflicting it's been. And this person writes, that we are, all these things that we are taught, it can conflict against what we've been taught in the Catholic Church, and not by accident or not to be mean we just don't realize how much we get our human selves into the church. Who's writing these laws? Some laws are excellent and needed because we humans are imperfect. And just like with the 10 Commandments, God was hoping people didn't need anything written down, that they could just love him and learn from him and obey him, be close to him. But he realized people were having all these graven images and false gods and going in the wrong direction. So he gave Moses the 10 Commandments. Those 10 Commandments cover everything. But they are not enough. We people, we just keep going more and more, wanting more and more temporal. Because we are losing the capacity, or we don't have faith in the capacity God gives us to be spiritual beings from his kingdom, from God and Christ's kingdom, but living here on earth, we forget from where we come from and from whom we come. We forget that. We get all involved in the here and now. And it makes such a difference in our what we do in the church, what we do to his church even. This next statement is a cruncher. It broke through to me. Thank you, person, for doing this, for heeding the nudges. I know how hard it was. And yes, I do know what these nudges are like. And God knew that you would do it in just the right timing. Person writes, after saying, about all these things that we've been taught, customs of the temporal world church that we are taught, or that we ourselves come into trusting in more, or wanting, like the people who want some kind of temporal approval, a bishop to approve. And yes, they say, oh, but that, God is in that person, or, the person's in an authority, a figure for God. Well, yes, but it's reduced. See, it's watered down from God himself. It's a temporalized version. And why have that when you can have God directly? See, so God did make it. I don't think God is in favor of that. But he wasn't in favor of having to give people the 10 Commandments. But he did it. He wasn't happy. We know that from the Old Testament. And even with giving them a king, an earthly king. They wanted an earthly king. So he gave them one finally after they kept carrying on. They couldn't trust to get through. They were griping about their food, the suffering they had getting to the promised land. So God gave them manna from heaven. See, God, something tangible. And Jesus did the same in the Last Supper. Jesus knew we wouldn't be satisfied. We wouldn't have enough faith and strength to really grasp that he remains in us and us in him. His love and our love. It's love. And that his real presence is in us. So he gave us the ability, the priest to the apostles, and became the priest then, and on down the line for all these centuries. Every single bishop and priest comes from the first 12, minus Judas, and then Matthias, I think, took place. So it's our doing that we are weak, and we have this sort of addiction to the temporal. We just can't quite trust in the spiritual when Jesus says, even though he gave us metaphors like, I am the vine, you are the branches. We needed, he knew we would need something tangible. So he gave us the consecrated, temporal, tangible host and wine that actually is his body and blood, transubstantiated, and strengthens us. But I have found, and of course it goes against the priests and the bishops, something's wrong. You're not standing at the gospel, and why isn't God having you have communion? When I was in God. He was feeding me directly. I had become one in the Mass. And the Mass was one in me, through, with, and in me. And it has remained that. That's why I hesitated to admit I don't watch the Mass through my little YouTube or on YouTube. I've tried. It's just so, I'm just better off being in the ecstasy. I'm not in the ecstasy, but you know what I mean. I'm that was so powerful. It will never leave me. It will never leave me. And the closest I could describe it was the closest to my death experience. So I know, when I die, I will have that even more so. But it's like, why go back? And I can get marvelous sermons on the gospel without any temporal stories added in. The ecstasies would always intrude and draw me back from God, and it was horrible. You don't want to be intruded upon. You don't want your bliss and your union with God interrupted. Be like having sex with your husband or your wife and children knocking at the door. I want a drink of water. It's like, that probably seems crude, but that's exactly how it is. It's when you're in love and you're in union, having union with God in Mass, or at any time, you don't want the temporal to intrude upon that union of love of the lover and his beloved. And it's just how it is. But we have the Mass, and we have the consecrated host and wine that becomes his real body and his real blood. Jesus knew we would need. And I did. I think God gave that experience to me as a gift and a strengthening, because he knew what was ahead. He knew I was being run out. And that I would need that. And also that I could understand it and now share it so that others can be open to that reality. You don't have to have an ecstasy to know the reality of it. And it doesn't mean that you'll stop having communion, no. But you'll know the reality at other times, or if you can't get there. God is in us all the time, and we are in God. His real presence, the Trinity, is in us. So what this person said, that the big situation is that when we have these experiences, this is this line that is so crucial, but we cannot unknow the truth, person capitalized, the truth that God has revealed to us. Blessed may he be. And so it gets down to, who are we going to trust? Who are we going to believe? God, or what we've been taught that has become temporalized, for example? Or am I going to choose a canon law that I found out that a bishop who was a dissenting bishop wrote and was involved, or didn't write totally, probably had a, but, or maybe, I don't know, but was helped get it pushed through to be a canon law for diocese hermits to be approved by bishops. And these few people that got him to help them, because they wanted out of their monasteries. They wanted to be hermits. They didn't want to be in the monastery anymore. But they didn't also want to be out in the world. Nothing. They wanted to have recognition and respect, and to be legal, and to have a place in the church, to be considered religious on equal footing of anyone in a religious order, to have that kind of esteem given them and status. They wanted all that. And they knew that this bishop would help push it through. This dissenting bishop, he's deceased now, Bishop Remy DeRue. He helped start Call to Action, a dissenting group in the church. He was disgruntled with how Vatican II turned out. Didn't go far enough for his tastes and desires. So he was a dissenter. And all of that, I thought, even that's not a good reason to have a canon law. Those reasons, very temporal reasons. Even if now someone can write and spiritualize them to death, it's still at the root. Why that when you can have God directly? Except that hermit life is more austere, God's hermit life, than being a diocese hermit, and being known and esteemed, and people in the diocese known, and get all this notice and everything. And some people are getting money from it, having their life paid for through donations or through, and then living together so they don't even have the solitude part. So I've been through all that before, but see how you have to make a decision now. And in other aspects, I have to make a decision. God showed me the truth that the Catholic Church is his church, the one he founded. And he wants me in it. He wanted me in it, and he still does. So I had to choose that. I could never leave. Where would I go? Lord, to whom would I go? And where would I go? However, then I'd had that vision, and I've had others and I have the reality that I had to figure out, that he obviously didn't want me anymore in parishes. He hadn't shown me being in them. He'd shown me the opposite, to accept even more. But here came another message the next day then from this person. Because I wrote back and said how much that first comment broke through to me and helped me, was life-saving, was spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, mentally, even bodily. Helped me so much, broke through. And it was the answers to the questions, some of the questions that I was asking God. And I knew it. I knew it was a miracle that this person, I didn't even realize that the person had resisted, how the timing worked out just right then. But I'd still ask some other questions of God. But this person didn't know I had asked other questions. So here comes this next comment. If I may add, most certainly, and yes, you may add even more if you have more. Our Lord removes his people when they need rest, healing, protection from the world. That put me to rest. And I realized that God does remove some of us. Witness protection program maybe, or respite for a short period of time, or for different types of assignments that are just between he and I, or could be like retirement. I wrote to my friend who's got terrible cancer that it might be that she and I are in palliative care. I'm in palliative care with the Lord. He's just keeping me now comfortable, restful, learning what I can, praising him, loving him all the more, and suffering. I'm having gut issues today got the heat pack on me, and very nauseated and lots of gut pain going on. And until he comes to get me, maybe, I don't know. But I know I've been pulled out, and it's okay. This person's been there. This person says, I too have been where you are, a prayerful reclusive for many years, after being beaten down by the world from doing the work God gave me to do. But not all my suffering was or is the world's or others' fault. Not all of it. But we have to be honest, some of it is as a result from those who do not understand. We can't blame them. We want to. I mean, or at first here you have a tangible person shunning you or saying horrible things or telling you you can't come or whatever else, cutting us off. But not all are that. This person says, not all of my suffering is the world's or others' fault. Much of my suffering was and is from my own sins and disobedience to him. And I know that for me. I've misinterpreted visions. I have squandered time. It's been 2 years now, but the year that I was helping my daughter get through, it was a very stressful divorce situation. It's always stressful, even though it was best. I knew it was best. We all knew. Her whole family knew. The hope that it wouldn't even last a year. And she hung in for 20 years. 2 people who were never meant to be married. And it was not a good situation for her at all. And I think he's happier now, even though he wouldn't probably earlier admitted it, but he might now. I don't know, but it doesn't matter. But she definitely is, although it's not easy. But she's got a great attitude. But I was so worn out, I didn't realize my thyroid had gone out. So after that, you have brain fog with that and all, and I was having worse pain blackouts. I didn't realize how bad my neck had become. So I was really sick and mostly in bed, very fatigued. You do get that way when your thyroid isn't working. It was kaput, totally shot. And so it was that time period that I got down, even spiritually. I said, Lord, I'm just going to do whatever until you come for me. I wanted Jesus to come for me. Then it wasn't, but maybe 5 months later, I had kidney failure and more things wrong with my blood. I've got bad blood issues going on that they thought was that multiple myeloma, but what ended up not. But it could turn into that at any point, or Waldenstrom's, it could be any point, because my dad was. So if you're a female, if you have a dad who had it, you can get Waldenstrom's. That's the only condition you can, if you're female, to get it through heredity, direct heredity. But I started getting better. Found out I had really bad anemia, and gradually. But even then, it was. I just want to. Well, that I wasn't at that point then, but the year before definitely. And I just fluffed off. I just told God, it's like in his face. I'm just not doing anything anymore. I'm not trying anymore. I'm just going to bide my time here, distract myself. I watched all these British shows with their accents so I could sleep more because I was so exhausted. But mindless things, just mindless. And I didn't strive in my spiritual life. I said, I'm just going to wait for you to come get me. And I said, I'll take the consequences. If I'm in purgatory or even hell, I'm just taking the consequences. I'm tired. I've had it. done, And then, I found out I was sick and all, and then that changed things. I got a grip again, but um, I squandered all that. That was my fault. I've squandered even now, and off and on, making wrong choices, getting into places, and then all the time and energy. But then there's always good. God allows us good even when we make mistakes. Where I didn't focus my time on reading and praying and writing because I was too busy on that island just trying to get myself out of the bad house I'd gotten into because my money was gone. I had to just work. It took me 5.5 years to do it pretty much myself, but with some help of some wonderful people who God brought in. A holy young man who's from Haiti, but a U.S. citizen now. My spiritual son. He calls me a spiritual mom. We're not in contact that much, but he's very busy working hard, put himself through school and is a registered nurse now, and just a really beautiful, evolved soul. Way, way beyond. It's just lovely, lovely soul, filled with love. And so that was a good, and he came and helped me and helped me and helped me. An excellent worker, even flew here. I flew him here a couple of times. Now he's just too busy since he's working now, long shifts, and takes extra shifts. He wants to get a house. He's got a goal, and he wants to get married, and so God bless John Patrick. But so many good things that he brings in to help us when we make our mistakes. And even this year, I didn't know I was going to get so sick. God is using me for suffering in other ways now, through more physical sufferings. And he's used that to keep me, to prevent me from getting too out there, be pulled out into the world more. And little things, he spared me from that canon law. He spared me from the parish. The priest started acting, getting to a point where I knew this is going to be trouble. And it was pointless me being in a little room. I couldn't even be in where the tabernacle was. It was just, and sitting, I can't sit like that anymore. God's provided to make his will happen despite my mistakes. And that's what this person is pointing out. That not all of that person's suffering either was the world's or others' faults. Much of my suffering was or is my own sins and disobedience to him. Even so, the person says, had I known what I was getting into by doing his will, I might not have done what he asked of me. And I have thought that so many times. So many times. And you feel guilty. You feel guilty thinking that. I even think, that I've thought, I hope none of my kids become Catholic. I don't want them to go through anything. I haven't admitted that yet. But, and of course I want what's right for them. Too, Catholicism has the mystical and the spiritual. The Mass is a mystical experience for those who grasp that, and some aren't comfortable with that. It's too much for them. So God allowed Protestantism and these evangelical churches and things. And a lot of Catholics aren't into the living word much. And the Protestants are. That's what they have, is his living word. We have the sacraments. We have his body and blood. And also his living word is half the Mass, his living word. And the whole Mass is based on it. There's foreshadowing, foretyping of the Mass in the Old Testament all through. So we need to see these things and appreciate and live it, embrace it. And but we're always progressing, and God progresses us on to deeper and deeper and more understanding. And he moves us, he's getting people out of the ensnaring, entangling nets of the temporal. And some of us are given assignments to help. Help be reminders of that. And to warn. Do not become ensnared in the entangling nets of temporal. Do not temporalize the church. And help detemporalize it even. From the unnecessary. Make wise choices for God over temporal, or over intermediary, or lesser than the ideal. No matter what it is you're doing, strive for the ideal. So this person then asked, "Why, Lord? Why? Why did this person do all these? Why was that as well? Why did the person have to do these things?" And the Lord answered, "To gain wisdom, to gain wisdom." Person writes, "I was angry because not only did I become very ill, my family suffered the most." Oh, that got to me. But it helped me. I'm so sorry for the person, because I know what it's like to have your family suffer most, because we are suffering. And that's what happened to my family. And the eldest barely communicates. Just being around me upsets her. All the suffering. She's very sensitive. She was the eldest. She was young, and she felt the responsibility. And she also was the most upset, I think, by the divorce. She was, definitely. And then the youngest was just a baby, so didn't remember it, but he's cut off totally. His dad's gotten involved, and he's aligned with him, and the dad's a narcissistic sociopath, so they lie and believe their lies, so you can't really blame them, except somewhere in their life they chose to go along with the lies, but they're not well people. They've got a big disorder, one that's very hard to correct. Sociopath is very, very hard. Narcissists can get help more readily for that if they will go. If they recognize, they'll think they're so great that they don't need any help. It's everybody else that does. It's wrong. But anyway, this touched me. My kids suffered, and the ramifications of it are that I trigger them. I trigger them so easily. And my own suffering, I wasn't a pretty picture. I wasn't in my actions even. It's hard to keep your temper. It's hard to push yourself when you need to be in bed, but you have little children that need you. But they can sense, and they have to sacrifice all the time. Their mom's not there, can't watch them. My son remembered how I was late picking him up from baseball practice and how embarrassed and upset he was. Well, I was home in bed, trying to keep every minute. I knew I had to get up and go get him. I remember. It was just so hard. It was so hard. Finally, I got up and got there. But it was late. I was late. And his coach had waited. I felt terrible. But no one would understand unless they were in my body at that point in time, that I did not have enough will. I had to work to get it going and to get in a car and to drive. I remember it. And I feel terrible, but he remembered that. He remembered other things. Loss of temper a couple of times, and the husband who I had loved was threatening me on the phone and saying terrible things, threats. And I vented by repeatedly slamming the refrigerator door. I was fixing supper when the phone call came, and I didn't want to cry. I didn't want to scream. That's what I did. It was like we were in this tiny apartment waiting to get into court to try to get out of state, to get away from all the harassment. I think he would hire people, hire illegals to do things to me, try to do things, and including somebody shot the bedroom window, but ransacked, just different things. And my situation came from various directions of evil. And I suspect this person's had that experience also. Not just things in the church that were shown, but the evil in the world. I had no idea the depth of how much the devil was in my husband. Some, eventually, I recognized he had some character things and I knew that he was cheating a couple of times, sensed it very deeply, was shown, but buried that, determined to keep the family together. But, and my vows meant something to me, my wedding vows, and I thought he would overcome it, correct, hang in. But this person, when they said, how the person became very ill. I had a collapse one time. It was 10 weeks. Lord help me up when it was Easter, but from St. Francis de Sales until Easter that year. Easter was maybe around like April 8th or 9th that year. And I didn't know if I was ever going to get up again. And my kids were worried. The girls were in college. The one who was just in college, her second year, was so worried and would call. And the older one was, but she's so sensitive. She holds everything in. And then my son was just little, maybe in 7th grade then, or 6th grade. And he would run in from school, being dropped off. My cousin would pick him up at the bus. And just run in, mommy, are you alive? Are you alive? Run back to the bedroom to make sure I was still there. He had worried that I would die during the day when he was gone. He went through a period of not eating, and it's just hard and then to have that happen with your family, that's really suffering because you love so much. Love to suffer and suffer to love. There's that intermingling of suffering and love, always, that interplay. But it's what helps increase the love. Is we suffer with those we love, and we love more the more the suffering. It's a mystery. It's a mystical grace. So this person said to God, when the God had said, well, you gain wisdom. That's why all this. God gave the person wisdom. And the person said to God, honestly, Lord, I could have done without the bit of wisdom I gained because my innocence is completely destroyed. God remained silent as I recalled what St. Teresa said. Lord, if this is how you treat your friends, no wonder you have so few. So the person continues writing here, even though my work for God was successful because he willed it to be so, and that's the truth with any assignments he gave me. They're successful because God wills it to be, and God gives us all the means, including sometimes other people to help or or just the strength to persevere, to fight against the desire just to give up and quit on the work that we're given, or the assignment, as I call them. But even so, in this person writes, my heart was in shambles because I never knew the world was so full of evil. And that includes the church world and any of the churches. You know, when you read about there's, I think, a high percentage of youth ministers in the Protestant world that have been sexually abusive of kids. There's been research on that, statistics, and the horror for those parents. And the same as within the Catholic Church with priests, or, that was a horror. It needed to be broken and expunged. It needed to be dealt with and ongoing. And there's other things that need to be dealt with in the church. Just the pride and this unwritten code of silence, that you don't dare express the reality in the prayerful hope that others will be helped and others will be strengthened to see. Don't go that route. Or, see the Mass as a mystical event. It is. See the ideal, and don't let the evil destroy it for us. Try to live the ideal. I came to that at points too, where I would pray, when I would want to get out, flee. When I found out the truth about the convent nearby, and my godmother, my sponsor and my godmother, and my dear friend, Sister Henrietta, and her double life going on, and how disgruntled the sisters were, and dissenters belonged to this call to action, and she had been grooming me. She became angry then when I said, no, that's not me. I wouldn't do that. And she became very resentful of my spiritual father, who was the chaplain of the convent. And I had to be very careful because he was elderly. They would take it out on him because he wasn't. He was a rock there. He was a rock of God, there to have Mass and to have confession for the few that it really meant something anymore, who weren't there with the goal of disrupting, of breaking the traditions and the laws and the ways that are good, that God does approve of, and that God does think are necessary for a huge church or an organization of His in a vast, huge, populated and to fit in with our society. It can't be just like it was in Jesus' time in the temporal aspects, because it's so huge. But in the spiritual, it needs to be as Jesus. And that's why we need to know Jesus well, so we know what He wants, and we know what God would choose compared to what the temporal choice would be. We would know God's truth in all situations, and we choose wisely then. The person continues, now, of course, I understand what I gained from those years is more and more of Jesus. After all, as St. Paul said, He is the power and wisdom of God. This person gained more and more of Jesus. And that's exactly right. And I wrote that to my friend who's likely going to die not too long even, with as bad as the cancer is, unless God chooses to have a major miracle. But I wrote to her that all the suffering she's having now, she's very fatigued, weak, and no appetite. I mean, like none. I guess just can barely eat anything. That makes you sick right then, and you suffer terribly. I've been through periods where I couldn't eat for a few weeks, and you just drink water and things, but you become very emaciated and very ill. In other ways, your body starts to feel like it's shutting down. But I said, we gain more and more Jesus. I wrote to her about this person and the miracle of this to help her see the spiritual, and that her suffering now isn't in vain at all. It's part of the work that we do. And that, she's been very more temporal, increasingly, more into the externals herself, has gotten that way more. And I think seeing the things in the church, people think it's these temporal externals. If we do more of that, the more of the formula, it will keep the church as it used to be. We don't understand. It's not the externals. It's within us that matters. It's the spiritual and our faith and our determination of getting to know Christ and living Christ. Love. Becoming pure love. God is pure love. Learning God's love. Above all things. And that includes the temporal externals of the church today. And to love God in his church, Christ as head, in the ways Christ loves his church and is his church. Meaningful. And of love. Love always rules. Love is God's law above all laws. So we gain more and more Jesus. And that's a good thing. See, that's a tremendous outcome. And it's true because of love to suffer and suffer to love. The more we love Jesus, the more we will want to know everything about him and to experience everything of the one we love. To be fully united with the one we love, we need to grasp and understand and even feel what the loved one went through and feels, even now. What does Jesus feel when he sees our own sins, my own sins, when he sees me in despair or fluffing away or being upset or confused and wasting what could be time praising him? So yes, God sent this person to break through to me and to let me know I'm not alone. I knew I wasn't alone. It makes such a difference when there's someone out there who writes and expresses the wisdom they've gained. This is all so wisely written. I go around it in my dither of trying to express when I've lost those years of my life of being able to concretely and concisely express things. I have trouble thinking of words between the head injury, my age, and the increasing pain. It's harder and harder for me to even read or focus or think or be concise or to express what what I know inside. But this person has wisdom and expressed, well, however long this video is, in 3 comments, concise comments. So the person says here, so eventually I came to understand what I took as innocence was really my ignorance. He knew that very well. God knows best. Love in Christ, dear sister. And I say the same back to this person. And I am so sorry for all you've suffered and for how ill you became. But you've also helped me to realize I'm still ill. I can barely have a talk about something. Or I got that phone call from the friend from years ago. And it brought up so many triggers of traumatic things that were part of my work and my assignments for God, and part of the suffering. And part of that suffering was my own fault through my own disobedience of God and through my own sin. Even all the suffering I went through in the soup kitchen. That doing the soup kitchen was a penance from the Virgin Mary. She gave it to me as a penance. And so, of course, there was going to be suffering in it, but also tremendous success. Why? Because the Virgin Mary showed me exactly how to set it up. And God blessed it. This person points that out. You know, our work becomes successful. Yes, the young priest, when it became obvious he wasn't going to change, that the devil was in him to that degree, that instead he was really sort of mocking me, that I was trying, and he was faking, and then he would do something terrible. And then he kicked me out and laughed. He laughed at the church door because he had fooled the bishop too. People were writing to the bishop, I was talking with this priest, or I was this or that. And some old man thought I was having an affair with him. I think I was like 54 at the time. Yes, I was. I was 54. And he was 40. And I wore my gray gym. I was ascetic. No, absolutely not. I was talking with him, and he needed that. He wanted that because a huge part of him was trying hard to at least break the porn addiction. But the other was just getting worse and worse, his attraction to underage boys, and to one in particular. And more and more came out. And it came time that I had to report him. But he had the bishop fooled. The bishop talked to him, and he told me, you can't come here anymore, can't see me anymore. And he laughed. He says, the bishop talked about you, and people are writing letters and about how horrible you are. And he laughed, and he thought it was great fun. And then I knew just even how more sick he was. I'd already knew that he was like a sociopath, but he then said, the bishop said, who's the spiritual director, she or you? And he said, well, I am. He says, well, get rid of her. He said, she's dangerous. Don't have anything to do with her. She's dangerous, a dangerous woman. And then not 4 months later, you saved the church. What would you like? I'll do anything you'd like. So, that's just that's the world. And I liked that better. And the Reverend Monsignor was being nice and all. They thought I was some other person. I took on in all this stuff to identify and to prove that I wasn't a street person imbecile. But anyway, it was just love to suffer and suffer to love. And the more we love, we get more and more Jesus. And you have to expect that we're going to experience everything Jesus went through to a certain degree, so that we can love our beloved Jesus and understand him even more. And the thing is you can think, well, I don't want that. I'm not going to. Love will get you through. Love will override all else. And you'll keep going and you'll keep going until God pulls you out when you need to be protected. And I should have been sooner. I was too far into my own strong will that I had to gut it out and stick it out and keep trying and keep going, because I don't like to get bad-mouthed. My ego, my id is too strong. It has to die. And this is help. Thank you to this person and for following the nudges. Of course you were going to. Love calls you. Jesus always wins over anything. And same with me. But with me, I need to obey now and go against what others would ever think and hibernate like a bear. That's what he wanted. God bless his real presence in us, and praise be Jesus Christ, the holy name of Jesus. And thank you to this person. And if you have more, please share. And I'm sorry for your suffering, but yet I rejoice in it. You understand. And the rest of you, some of you have had these, or this will help you understand. And also to not fear doing what God wants of us. Like Jonah. But do what God wants of us, but then stop when he's pulling us out to bring him to himself, giving us retirement. I have retirement, respite, palliative care now. And even last night I thought, stop beating myself up that I'm not reading my book. I was too tired. And it's hard to get into it. I have to get my mind more into the writings of 120 years ago or so. Anyway, God bless you all, and God bless His Majesty. Thank you to His Majesty.